Hi, everybody. Today is Friday, January 17th, and our friend Pepe Escobar is back with us. Welcome back, Pep.
Always a pleasure, Nima, and your smile make gives me solace compared to the dark clouds around us.
And let's get started, Pepe, with what has happened in the Middle East between Israel and Palestinians. Right now, we have a new ceasefire, and there are a lot of tensions in Israel between Netanyahu and his administration, Ben Gavir and Smotrich and all of these people. On the other hand, Hamas said that they're going to abide by the ceasefire. How, who's going to get the credit? Joe Biden said that he's responsible for this ceasefire. He could achieve that. On the other hand, we know that Donald Trump sent an envoy on his part to this deal to talk with these people. Who who's gonna get the credit of a ceasefire if they can achieve it?
The short answer to your very good question, Nima, is Trump. Why? Because he sent his special envoy, Witkoff, to Tel Aviv. Witkoff arrived in Tel Aviv, sat down with Netanyahu, and presented the new picture to him straight on. And I said, that's it. There's no plan B. And you cannot say no. This is what we want, and you're going to do it now. This is the short headline. You won't see this in a headline anywhere, especially in the US. But this is what actually happened. So it's obvious that I think it's probably his last public appearance, still crash test dummy, no? As president of the United States, taking credit for himself. In terms of lies, this is stratospheric, in fact, because he could have gotten a ceasefire 15 months ago. It was just a phone call, or send Secretary of Genocide little Tony Blinken to Tel Aviv to do what Witkoff actually did in a matter of minutes. In fact, he didn't. So this exiting American administration is fully complicit with the genocide, and history will judge them by this absolutely horrible measure. It's too early to say there's any merit in it because many of us familiar with West Asia, we know that this ceasefire won't work. It won't hold. Don't forget that ceasefires in Lebanon were not respected by Israel. Ceasefires in Syria were not respected by Israel, which was bombing Syria for years until the head choppers got to power a few weeks ago. In Gaza, it's even worse because the whole thing everybody knows is about Eretz Israel, its genocide, extermination of Palestinian, ever expanding borders, forever wars, etc. This is uh, in the collective unconscious, not only of the leadership of Israel, but Israeli society as a whole, as the best Israeli scholars who actually live or write or study Israel have been saying for quite a while. So it's no wonder, as you mentioned in the beginning, that the Old Testament psychopathologicals like Ben Giver and Smotrich are already saying this is a defeat, which it is, by the way, because they didn't get any of their so-called targets. They did not eliminate Hamas. On the contrary, Hamas is rejuvenating itself at breakneck speed, as far as we know, as we speak. And of course, they are threatening to abandon the current coalitions. So this government in Israel can collapse soon, and that would be fantastic, nah? From the point of view of maybe sending Netanyahu to jail. There is an open possibility as well. So it is a major defeat for everyone involved in Tel Aviv. And from the point of view of Trump, is quite intriguing because he doesn't care, in fact, about Gaza or Palestine or ceasefire or whatever. The only thing that matters to him is to get some sort of stable government in Israel to promote a rapprochement with Saudi Arabia. So it's the Abraham Accords, which, by the way, involve Jared Kushner, who will be back in I would say, in an invisible but not so invisible role in Trump 2.0. So this is the only thing that matters, and this has a direct influence on the way BRICS is working, because this current BRICS position of Riyadh, we are in BRICS, but we are not. Sometimes they go to meetings, sometimes they don't. They are supposed to be part of policy making in BRICS, but they are not. So they are still hedging their bets. We all know why, because all their money is in London, New York. So they cannot simply tell the empire we are a full BRICS member, like Indonesia, for instance, which is now a full BRICS member. So this game playing will continue. And in fact, it's a charade. The Saudis are playing a charade, and they are waiting for Trump to see what Trump is going to offer them for this reapproximation with Israel. So the whole thing is a theater, is a kabuki, is an absolute mess. But now with, let's say, assuming there is some sort of respect of the ceasefire by the Israeli government, and this thing progresses, and we have at least some humanitarian aid coming to Gaza, relieving a little bit, an infinitesimal part of the suffering of people in Gaza. This in itself, I wouldn't say we can construe it as a victory, as Hamas has been trying to spin it, but let's say some measure of relief to the suffering in Gaza. But the ceasefire itself most certainly is not going to hold, because the Israelis, the only thing that they know what to do, apart from trying to impose their narrative in West Asia and all over the world, global North and global South, is to bomb and to lie. And this is not going to change. It's intrinsic to any government in Israel, So that's where we are at the moment. It's a very complicated juncture. And to add to the complication, this is not the number one preoccupation for Trump 2.0. Trade war against Europe, trade war against China, trying a solution for Ukraine, etc. So this is not number one. The only thing is if Trump 2.0 has an opening to establish the Abraham Accords. That's the only thing that really matters for him personally. And for the moment, we don't see that happening.
It's important to mention that since the moment the ceasefire agreement was announced until today, January 17th, 9 a.m. local time in Gaza, more than 103 people were killed, 27 children and 31 women.
And count. It continues.
Yeah, exactly. And do you see this sort of division within Israel as a real sort of matter that is happening right now? Because at the end of the day, Israel would benefit from this ceasefire because we know their economy is not doing well. They're not capable of expanding the war after all. How these people like Ben Gvir, Smotrich are insisting on the continuation of the conflict when they're not capable? Their economy is crashing. Their economy is not doing well.
Yes, but you're speaking from a realist point of view, Nima, which all of us analysts, we deal with facts, and we are realists. We follow actual reality, not messianism, apocalypsism, etc., which is exactly the mentality of these people. You cannot reason with people like Ben Gvir, Smotrich, etc., and the people under them, or settlers who are trying to destroy the West Bank as we speak. It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. It's a completely otherworldly, literally, mentality. Our friend Alistair Crook has been peerless among Western analysts analyzing their mentality from the inside. Alistair knows West Asia very well, better than I would say anyone in the West. So this is not going to change. On the contrary, and the problem is these people are part of the current government. If they are out of the government, they will continue to do the same thing outside of the government. It's not going to change. This 700,000 or 800,000 settlers armed to their teeth who want to kill every Palestinian inside, they are not going to disappear. We all know the only way to deal with these people, which is not going to happen. I don't need to spell it out for our audience, for all of you. So this is not going to happen. So messianism, apocalypsism, and this demented worldview based on ever-expanding Israel, the Eretz Israel, the ultra-Zionist project is not going to disappear. Whoever is in power in Tel Aviv, inside or outside the government.
I don't know if you saw the video that 2 hours ago came out on X that Ben Gvir drawing his gun on settlers.
Exactly.
It's a huge division within the society in Israel. It's not just.
It's a huge division, Nima, but the majority of the Israeli society actually approves the slow motion genocide, the hardcore genocide, the ethnic cleansing. And it's absolutely terrible because this is ultra hardcore demented Zionist on tons of crack. And this is how they think. By the way, I would like to dedicate our conversation today. There are two dedications. The last one I'll leave for the end of our conversations to David Lynch. My number one dedication is to two American journalists, which I have the honor to know personally, Max Blumenthal and Sam Husseini in Washington at the last press conference of Secretary of Genocide, Little Tony Blinken. Max destroyed Blinken live. And it's great because we have footage from at least three different points of view, including Max's smartphone, the questions that he posed to Blinken, treating him as Tony. He can. Because, Max's father, by the way, was very close to Tony Blinken, Sidney Blumenthal. So Max grew up in Washington. Max knows all these players in person. So he destroys Blinken in front of a mute journalistic audience. I would never call these pieces of shit journalists who go to a Secretary of Genocide last press conference and they are incapable of asking the relevant questions. Max, not only he asked questions, but he presented facts before he was thrown out of the room. And Sam Husseini, which is probably, I would say, the best on the ground reporter in Washington for decades. When he was trying to pose his questions, he was arrested. He was taken out of the room by three bulky Secret Service agents under instructions of the mini Count Dracula, spokesman, that absolutely disgusting reptilian spokesman for the State Department. So this was a fitting last press conference of the Secretary of Genocide. But at least we had two real journalists practicing real journalism in the US and exposing all those idiots sitting in the room as not even qualifying as chihuahuas. Chihuahuas is already too much for them, And of course, the main questions revolve around what? About the genocide, about demented Zionism as an intrinsic component of Israeli society today. And coming back to a few minutes ago, this is not going to disappear. And the fact that this exiting, ghastly, worst administration in the modern history of the United States perpetrated that, enabled the genocide, that does not mean that the new one is going to be a bunch of Saint Gabriels or Saint Michael. No, no way. And in fact, some of Trump's team are already saying that the thing is to exterminate Hamas, meaning killing everybody, and meaning killing everybody in Gaza, essentially. So nothing's going to change substantially, you know. And that's what makes it even more terrifying for all of us in the global north and in the global south. You know, it's this is a tumor that keeps expanding, and there's no cure. We all know the cure for cancer, what it is, right? So it cannot apply to these people. And these people are contaminating the whole of West Asia and contaminating American foreign policy and contaminating the whole Beltway. You know, Capitol Hill and everywhere. This centers of power decision centers in Washington, in the Beltway, in New York, in New Jersey, you know, you name it. So it's terrifying because there are no good options when it comes to the perpetuation of the Zionist project. There are no good options. And even if the Palestinians may have a little bit of respite at the moment, it's not going to last long. And we know it won't be respected. And we know that the killing will continue.
Yeah, as you mentioned, what has happened to Sam Hosseini, he didn't do anything. He was sitting there and
he was sitting. He was starting to ask questions, Nima.
Yeah.
And this is all of us who, like, I lived in Washington. I worked in Washington as well. We go to these press conferences all the time. And we know that it's a bloody theater. You cannot ask a proper question. There are two options. Either they don't respond or they throw you out of the room, which is exactly what happened in this one. I remember when I was at the National Press Club in Washington and Israeli officials were there. When we were starting to ask questions, including Sam, they shut us up. And they left the stage. The only difference that Blinken did not leave. Blinken looked like a bloody rat saying, I'm willing to answer all questions. Blah, 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 blah. Let's respect the procedure and all that. And he was being asked serious questions, which obviously couldn't respond.
Yeah. And Matt Miller was sending these security guys to...
Well, three to manhandle, harass, manhandle, and expel Sam from the room.
Yeah, let me play the clip of Sam.
Yes, wonderful. Yes.
You pontificate about a free press. You pontificate about a free press. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. I'm asking questions after being told by Matt Miller that he will not answer my questions, and so I'm asking questions. Wasn't the point of the May 31st statement to block the ICJ orders? You blocked the ICJ orders.
Please sir, respect the process.
Oh, respect the process. Respect the process. Well, everybody from Amnesty International. From Amnesty International to the ICJ saying that Israel's doing genocide and extermination, and you're telling me to respect the process. Criminal! Why aren't you in The Hague?
Yeah.
This will go in the history books, Nima. This is absolutely extraordinary, especially in a country that professes freedom of the press. For instance, in my case, every time that I travel to the US, I go on a press visa. You go through a screening process. They know that you're a journalist. They give you a press visa, which is theoretically one of the best visas you can have to visit the United States. So this theoretically proves to the world that they respect journalists. They don't. Only if you behave as chihuahuas and puppets. That's it. Which is that room was behaving the way they want. not asking questions. And when one of them is arrested and the other one is thrown out of the room, they don't do anything. They don't even raise their hands. Why you're doing this to one of us? No, because they're cowards. And if they're not, they're going to lose their jobs because their editors are going to fire them. So this for all of you, our audience, this is how freedom of the press works in the United States. So that's how it's going to go into the history books, like forever.
Pepe, when it comes to the strategy of Donald Trump, before coming to power, deciding to force Netanyahu to accept the ceasefire, at least from what we've seen so far. They don't know what will happen. But so far, how do you find his strategy? Do you think that he has started, in my opinion, with the most difficult decision in the Middle East? Because we haven't seen that. The reason that I'm saying that it was a most difficult decision, because we haven't seen any sort of decisive decision on the part of the Biden administration. As you mentioned, they tried to help Netanyahu in each and every way possible to facilitate what Netanyahu was doing for more than a year in Gaza. Right now, Donald Trump at least tried to force Netanyahu to accept a ceasefire. What would be the next step on his part? We know that we have a conflict in Ukraine, which is much more, these people in power in Washington, the blob, the deep state, is much more involved in Ukraine. How do you see the policy in Ukraine going forward?
Okay, in my past two columns, in fact, I've been trying to outline the priorities for Trump 2.0. Until let's say 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, we knew that one of the priorities would be an extended hybrid war against BRICS, especially China, of course, but including all the other top BRICS. The concept of swing states that was articulated by U.S. think tank land a year and a half ago, roughly, states that they can try to destabilize because they are not following the empire. And these are all BRICS or crypto BRICS, or would-be BRICS. Brazil, India, South Africa, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. But then, after that famous intervention where he started talking about annexing Canada, Greenland, renaming Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, etc., we saw the second vector, which I called looting the allies. So now we know the two priorities for Trump 2.0. And it's very ambitious, and that gives us the framework of all that is uncontrolled chaos, in fact. It's the empire of chaos now embarking in uncontrolled chaos in several latitudes at the same time, and not only against the global south and the global majority, but the global north as well. NATO, what we call NATO-stan space. The whole Canada drama, which is now becoming a gigantic kabuki. And of course, Greenland, which is something that would be relatively easy for Trump 0.0 to absorb, annex, bribe, etc. So we can expect an offensive on Greenland starting right off the bat, in fact. Most important thing, like is something that I have been trying to stress, augmenting the empire's resource base. And Greenland has everything that they need: unexplored oil, unexplored gas, and lots of minerals, unexplored minerals as well. Perfect. Because in Trump's mind, the empire is being cornered. lost ground vis-a-vis Russia and China. So one way to recover part of the resource base and try to reorganize the resource base and expand the resource base is annexation. pure hardcore imperialism, which the empire knows how to do very, very well, as we know. And of course, looting the allies is inbuilt in this strategy because Denmark happens to be one of the best allies of the US on NATO. But do you think that Trump pays any attention to Copenhagen? Obviously not. Obviously not. So, and the reaction of the Danish government so far has been risible. The reaction of a true Chihuahua. So, convincing or pressing or harassing Copenhagen to get Greenland would be easy. The problem is the Greenlanders themselves. So there have been conflicting polls so far. One of them pro and another one against. Polls among 50,000 something inhabitants. So we still don't know what Greenland public opinion really wants. We know in fact, we know one thing. They want independence. They don't want the US taking over Greenland, and they don't want to remain with Denmark because Denmark, from their point of view, abandoned them decades ago, even though they have a large degree of autonomy. But Denmark doesn't do anything in favor of Greenland, So an independent Greenland would be something fascinating because then they will be an independent country. They will get into the United Nations. And now they are already saying, if we get into the United Nations, we're not going to antagonize United Nations members. And that's code for Russia. So this is going to be more complicated than Trump thought, probably. Because if it comes to Greenlanders themselves deciding their future, like people in Crimea and Donbass did, and that, of course, did not escape the ultra-sharp eyes of our friend Sergey Lavrov. He already said that on the record earlier this week. Yeah, Greenlanders should have the same right as the citizens of Crimea and Donbass had to choose who they want to be their masters. So, well, this is going to be one of the number one geopolitical dramas of a Trump 2.0. As for the war against the BRICS, that's much more complicated because we're going to have to wait to see what kind of trade sanctions are going to be launched, especially against China and possibly against other BRICS as well. And of course, the whole Ukraine or Country 404 drama, how Trump is going to play it out. Now they are already backtracking. Used to be, I can solve this whole thing with one phone call in 24 hours. Now it's 6 months. Soon it's going to be 1 year. I think Trump and his advisors are looking around and see that it's not going to be easy. And the ones who are able to read the fine print, or at least listen to speeches and press conferences by President Putin, Lavrov, Ryabkov, etc., they will be more familiarized with the Russian conditions for the start of a dialogue. Without that, Russia doesn't care. It has to be the Russian way and what was established by Putin and the Security Council in terms of NATO, in terms of end of sanctions, in terms of reintegrating Russia commercially with the West. If that doesn't happen, it's going to be still the Russian way on the battlefield, which is now even the foreign ministry in Moscow has been saying for months now. Okay, all these unrealistic proposals, don't cut it. We established how we want to proceed with that. If you don't agree, it's very simple. The war will continue our way and we will win on the battlefields, which is exactly what they're doing as we speak. So we are on a wait and see mode, all of us. Let's see the first actions of Trump 2.0 on all these fronts: trade war, economic war, technological war, Ukraine war, hybrid war against the BRICS, and West Asia, which, once again, the main preoccupation is Israel, Saudi Arabia getting together. And it all evolves at the same time. That's what makes it so complicated, Nima. And when we look at the caliber and of the people around Trump, appointed by Trump so far, it's not very encouraging, is it? By the way, I have to, small detail. The guy appointed by Trump to head the Pentagon, he goes to Capitol Hill, he's grilled by the Senate, he's asked about ASEAN. Can you name one ASEAN country? He can't. He doesn't even know what ASEAN means.
He was talking about Australia.
He's talking about Australia, Japan, and South Korea. Can you imagine a guy who heads the Pentagon, which has a hard-on for Taiwan and wants a war against China centered on Taiwan? Taiwan happens to be in the South China Sea. ASEAN has 5 or 6 countries who are marginal to the South China Sea. And this idiot doesn't even know what ASEAN is.
Very important. Yeah.
Now, if you don't know what ASEAN is, means that you don't know shit about Southeast Asia. And you don't know anything about Taiwan. And you don't know anything about the relations between China and ASEAN, which happens to be all the 10 of ASEAN. Their major trade partner is China. And this guy's heading the Pentagon. So when I saw that, I had to replay that tape at least 3 times. To say, I cannot believe that. And that's exactly what happened. It's on the record now. He can do 5 sets of 47 push-ups. So, oh, look, I'm very strong and all that. Yeah, but you don't know shit about Southeast Asia. So it's not very encouraging, And the other ones, oh my God. And all those Zionists, which will be replicating the hard-on for a war, an Israeli war against Iran, implicating the United States. This is also not very encouraging. So, we are, it's once again highway to hell, a CDC in front of us, But that's the empire. It doesn't matter. It's a bipartisan thing. It's the inner logic of how the empire of chaos, plunder, and facilitation of genocide works. And this is not going to, even as I tried to, in my last column, I tried to picture Trump 2.0 from a pop angle. After all, he's a pop entertainer. So I was trying to lighten up some very, very somber and dark overtones of what may happen in terms of getting deeper into uncontrolled chaos, And of course, there's going to be a domestic war because Trump domestically will be at war with most of the deep state. And there's no guarantee that he's going to win this domestic war at all. So, and that's what makes it, I would say that the situation now is even more complex than at the start of the previous horrible administration. It's much more complicated. And of course, the empire is cornered now in a way that it was not 4 years ago. Like Emmanuel Todd in his outstanding French interview a few days ago summarized, and we have to repeat and keep it in mind because he had the best summary of what Trump 2.0 is going to be. He will have to manage the American defeat vis-a-vis Russia. And how can Trump start to understand that, devise a strategy to start talking to Russia, knowing that the US lost the proxy war, and sell that to American public opinion, and especially sell that to the deep state? It's practically impossible. We know it's from the start. We know it's practically impossible. So he will keep, I would say, diverting the narrative and changing the subject all the time and coming up with victories, Trump style. For instance, the ceasefire is already being spun as his first victory in foreign policy. Assuming it holds, it is, but we don't know yet. So this is what he's going to be selling, these little victories here and there. Oof.
Yeah, if we assume Donald Trump's behavior in his first term, you remember John Bolton, Rex Tillerson, these people who were so they were just thinking of themselves and superior to Donald Trump in terms of the policies, in terms of the foreign policy of the United States. Right now, can we be positive about these new people coming to the administration, because we know they're not capable of imposing their policies on Donald Trump, which was one of the main reasons that Donald Trump couldn't work with Rex Tillerson, John Bolton, and these people, and even Steve Bannon. And you see these people are new, mostly young. They don't know what they're talking about most.
No, they don't.
That's why Donald Trump can just impose his policies on these people.
It's going to be, from Trump's point of view, he learned a lot in his first 4 years. So let's assume that he knows better how to navigate Washington, how to navigate power circles in Washington, and how to navigate the way people think in the Beltway. Let's assume, it's not guaranteed. But the amount of opposition that he's going to find all across the Beltway spectrum, maybe even bigger than during Trump 1.0. Don't forget, the US is a completely divided, fragmented nation. It's a dissolving nation. And we can expect from all these Democrat-controlled silos of information and power inside the deep state, they're going to do everything to sabotage Trump, of course. Apart from the fact that Trump, in many ways, sometimes is sabotaging himself, especially the way he appoints and trusts some people who are absolutely useless or dangerous. In the case of Bolton, he was very dangerous. And this new team, there are a lot of useless people and people who don't know anything about the world at large. If you ask them what is BRICS and what BRICS wants to, you won't get a single one who understands what's going on. I found particularly interesting that no one among his new inner circle mentioned the Northern Sea route, what the Chinese call the Arctic Silk Road, and the fact that the Arctic is controlled, 50% of the Arctic belongs to Russia, and one of Russia's top priorities for the 21st century is to develop the Far East, Siberia, and the Arctic. They don't even know how it. The only thing that we're going to have a lot of with Canada and Greenland. We're going to have a lot of new oil, new gas, rare earth minerals, etc. Russia already has all that, and they are harnessing all that to build a connectivity corridor linking the far east of Russia, the north of Russia, the Arctic, all the way to Europe, assuming some Europeans will profit from it. And China will profit a lot from the Northern Sea route, the Arctic Silk Road. For instance, nobody in the new Trump administration knows what is the North-South transportation corridor, which Russia, Iran, and India are building, and is one of the absolute key items in the Iran-Russia strategic partnership, which is going to be Nima, as we speak. In a few hours in Moscow. Pezeshkin is in Moscow. He went to the monument to the unknown soldier this morning in front of the Kremlin. And they're going to be meeting this afternoon, and probably the signing will be at the end of this afternoon, as we speak. It's the North-South Transportation Corridor, which is big competition to the Suez Canal and one of the great connectivity corridors of the 21st century, along with the Northern Sea Route. Try to explain that to members of Trump 2.0, what Russia, Iran, and India are doing, what Russia and China are doing, these connectivity corridors, how they're working and how they plan to work, how they are developing, etc. They have no clue about all that.
Yeah,
just like they don't know what is ASEAN.
Imagine Keith Kellogg talking about the conflict in Ukraine. So how they're gonna get it?
They already talked. Did you see what leaked in terms of what they are actually discussing to offer Russia? Plan A is, look, we can get rid of some sanctions if we start discussing a peace arrangement, which basically will be a ceasefire, freezing the conflict, including then sending peacemakers to a DMZ between Ukraine and Russia. And plan B, if you don't agree, we're going to sanction you to death again. How? I cannot even qualify this as stupid. This even a kid knows that this doesn't work, and these people are actually discussing along these lines. It's terrifying how pathetic, provincial, circumscribed, narrow-minded, practically a bunch of illiterates talking about an enormous geopolitical problem that, in fact, involves the whole planet.
Hubris is killing them.
Yes, go ahead, Neiman. It's not encouraging at all,
Yeah, hubris is killing them.
Hubris is killing them. Yes, from the inside them. Hubris is a cancer corroding the empire. Absolutely.
And these people don't care about the people of the United States.
No.
It's a game in their mind.
Of course, these are, in fact, when Harpy Hillary Clinton defined half of the American population as the deplorables, for the 0.1%, the whole of the country is a bunch of deplorables, apart from the 0.1% and maybe the 1, 2, or 3% that supports them or works for them or are their messengers, etc., including these people in Senate and Congress. The rest, 97% of the population, is totally disposable, and it's a bunch of deplorables. They don't care. Look at Los Angeles. Los Angeles is the best metaphor of them. It's very, very sad as a metaphor. Well, I am a former resident of LA, Nima. I lived in Hollywood, actually. So I was almost crying when I saw those images. The LA that all of us, many of us, knew, and it was still thriving. It was great. It was still part of the American dream. When I lived there in the late 80s, early 90s. Was still maybe the last part of the American dream in California. It will never come back. And they let it happen, and they let it be destroyed. Everything, the whole system, on a federal level, on a state level, on an administration of a Los Angeles level, they let it happen. They knew it would happen. They let it happen. The destruction of one of the great metropolises of the world, in fact. So they don't care, of course. They don't care. The only thing that matters for these people is, petty politics inside the Beltway, who is running who in Washington, the industrial military complex and its ramifications, which is a bubble, as we know very well, as defined by our friend Ray McGovern. It's a small bubble, but the bubble is self-sufficient, and the bubble doesn't need the rest of the country. And the bubble works in a parallel economy, which has nothing to do with the economy at large. So everybody else literally is disposable and deplorable. And that's how societies corrode, and that's how civilization. We cannot even call American civilization. It's not exactly civilization. It's a bunch of barbarians who got lucky. And for instance, at the moment, Nima, I am binging on Yellowstone, where Kevin Costner plays an old school mega capitalist in Montana. It's a fantastic series because it shows how the wealth of America was built, and it has a conflict between them and tribal societies. It's fascinating, and I remember when Clint Eastwood at the Cannes Film Festival, he used to define that the only two art forms that America ever produced was westerns and jazz. Absolutely. And westerns, of course, the point of view of the destroyer, always. And jazz was not, jazz was the real America because jazz is black music. And real American music is black from head to toe. Everything, you know. So it's very sad to see that, well, at least they, well, Yellowstone, you can, if all of you who are following, or if you plan to watch Yellowstone, it's a sort of modern Western, in fact. And it's great because hubris, as you mentioned, is inbuilt in the whole system, you know. And obviously, they cannot conceive of a different system. So it is a hubris festival. And now, in postmodern, decaying, disappearing America. And this disappearance of LA, which used to embody the American dream, it could not be more symptomatic, in fact.
Pepe, you've mentioned that how dangerous it can get if there is a war, a direct war between Iran and the United States.
Yes.
Here comes the question: how does that sort of war fit in Trump's plan, Trump's grand strategy? Is that going to work for Trump? Because I don't see Donald Trump being interested in having a war, a major war with Iran in the Middle East.
Absolutely correct, Nima. But the people around him, they want it. Because what? At least 80% of the people he appointed, they are hardcore Zionists, some of them with double passports. They are Ziocons directly linked with the ultra Zionists in Israel. And as we know, for this Messianic apocalypsist people in Israel, the war for them is the war against Iran, which they want the Americans to fight for them. That's the problem. Trump obviously knows that this war, if it would ever happen, it would not going to be bad for business only. It will destroy the global economy and the empire with it. I assume that we don't know for sure, but we can all assume that Trump is privy to Pentagon games. Pentagon gamed all scenarios of a war against Iran, and the US loses all of them for years. We know that. Everybody knows that in the Beltway. So Trump must know that as well. So he knows that this is an unwinnable war. And still, we have these trial balloons via the media that employs those cowards that were at Tony Blinken's last press conference in Washington. The trial balloons of, we are discussing the possibility of attacking Iran's nuclear program. So if this is not hubris, wow. In fact, this is hubris on a Milky Way scale. No? It's completely nuts. Why? Because these neocons and ziocons, they control most of the narrative that you see on American mainstream media. And of course, in connection with Israel and in connection with the moguls who own media all across the West, which are all Zionists, essentially, different degrees, but essentially all of them are Zionists. So let's hope, and now we enter the we enter a Virgin Mary territory, in fact, that some of Trump 2.0 officials will take a look at what's happening today in Moscow, the signature of the vast, comprehensive strategic partnership between Iran and Russia, which includes, by the way, defense at the highest levels, and understand that now it's a different ballgame. Yeah, it's very important. This partnership it's not a military alliance per se, but it includes, if Iran is attacked by the US, Russia is not only is not going to attack Iran, but Russia will help Iran in undefined ways. It is the level of understanding between the highest echelons in Tehran and Moscow is very, very high. I had the chance to see some of it from a Russian point of view for almost the past 2 years. Iranian delegations that were coming to Russia all the time to discuss points of the strategic partnership, military collaboration, the ministries of defense, intertwining more and more, selling of military equipment, both sides. So this would send a message, theoretically, to these people at the heart of Trump 2.0 that try not to get in trouble with Iran because you're going to bite more than you can chew. But once again, Nima, hubris, no? The only thing that the empire understands is brute force. And it's not what Russia wants, and it's not what Iran wants. But it is what the Ziocons always want. And it is what Israel always practices, but against adversaries or non-adversaries or militias or guerrilla movements or a government that is in total decay, disappearing, like in Syria, etc. Try to put Israel to fight a real enemy. They're not cut for that because they are essentially coward killers, as the genocide amply demonstrated for the whole planet. But we are in a bind, all of us, because we know that the power of the Ziocon lobby inside the Beltway is enormous, and it won't diminish, whoever is in power at the White House. And Trump, of course, is surrounded by them, including major donors. So it's going to be very hard for him to navigate and to contain these people, even if himself knows that a major war in West Asia would be an enormous debacle for it. In fact, it would accelerate even more the end of the empire. And his main preoccupation, theoretically, according to what he says, is revitalizing the American economy. We still don't know how he's going to do that. We still don't know how he's going to convince American multinationals to re-delocalize back to the US. Not going to happen. Try explaining this to Apple. It's not going to work.
And how, Pepe, how do you see the way that Elon Musk is supporting AfD? Do you think that the Trump administration, we know that Elon Musk is so influential.
Yes.
It's so important, is a very important character in the Trump administration. So far, we've seen this way. But do you see these people, the Trump administration, supporting AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, in their policy toward Russia, which would be reconnecting the pipeline between Russia and Germany?
Well, the role of Musk as the sidekick, in fact, if this was a classic Hollywood flick, Elon Musk would be the sidekick that sometimes is even more important than the main character. And he has, of course, a larger than life role, not only because he's a super sidekick, but because he's he's the wealthiest person on the planet. And all his interlocking interests with the deep state. Elon Musk is essentially a deep state character with a large degree of autonomy, but pursuing many agendas that are intrinsic to the deep state, not necessarily his agenda. And now he's a sort of ambassador at large as well. And he openly interferes in foreign policy everywhere, even though he's not a foreign policy specialist. So his role is going to be immensely entertaining on several levels, from I would say, from the comic to the sinister in this administration. And obviously, he is already supporting pinpointed actors in the international landscape. And AfD in Germany is essential for them, because the Americans, as much as they, under Trump 2.0, as much as they would like to, let's say, not only continue to destroy, but possibly destroy Europe for good, relegate Europe to the role of a barely yapping chihuahua, they don't need Europe that is totally devastated. They want Europe as consumers, buying American products, or whatever America has to sell. And Germany, as the largest economy in Europe, fits perfectly. So, it's no wonder that the idea already floated in the US of if Nord Stream is reopened, maybe an American could go there and buy Nord Stream. Why not? This is already circulating. And of course, if you have a government in Germany which is relatively affiliated with the ideology of Trump 2.0, even better. So it's not by accident that Elon Musk is supporting Alice Weidel, which, by the way, she's very smart, very intelligent, she's well prepared. What she's saying about Nord Stream makes total sense. But at the same time, overall, what Trump 2.0 wants is emasculate what is left. But there's not much left, in fact, of the European Union mechanism and NATO itself. Going back to that, okay, pay up. And it's not 2% anymore, it's 5%. If you don't pay up, we don't care about you. That's it. Cost benefit. Pure business. And Trump is going to be very forceful on that. So no wonder all the chihuahuas here in Europe, they are absolutely terrified. They know what to expect. And it's going to be very harsh. And then, once again, at the same time, sort of resurrection, industrial resurrection of Germany, having cheap gas again, it's not so bad. But the Americans want to control the process, and this will be very, very hard. So Nord Stream is a consortium of European companies, Gazprom involved, etc. How an American is going to get all that, it's still very, very fuzzy, And how Germany then is going to deal with Poland, the Baltic Chihuahuas, etc., which is the new NATO, or the ideal NATO. Now the Secretary General is former Dutch Prime Minister, which is an absolute. It's more of an idiot than Stoltenberg, but he's doing his NATO shtick all the time, basically saying to European voters and European citizens, you have to pay up for defense, otherwise you're going to have to start speaking Russian or move to New Zealand. How stupid is that? Everyone in Europe living here paying absurdly huge taxes, but at least these taxes theoretically support welfare system and social services, etc. They're going to have their social services extinguished because they need to buy more weapons, essentially. It's completely absurd. This won't sell anywhere, but this is what the new NATO Secretary General is selling here, Nima. It's completely crazy. So Trump looking from the other side of the pond, looking at this, okay, let the Chihuahuas eat themselves. I don't care, as long as they pay up. So that's the strategy.
It seems that in the next target would be in Venezuela. I don't know if you saw the New York Times article. It says that overthrow or bring Maduro down.
The
It
guy
seems
who
that
wrote that is an absolute neocon asshole, Nima. It doesn't surprise me. This guy's beyond an asshole, and he doesn't know anything about, well, the rest of the world. Latin America doesn't know anything about Latin America, not to mention specifically Caribbean, Venezuela, etc. So it's obviously, and I think it was in the Washington Post, if I'm not mistaken, or Wall Street Journal. It was not New York Times. Well, this gives you once again an example of how the Zeocon lobby is powerful in terms of trying to shape public opinion. This thing is read by a few people, but because they still have the distribution channels, you have newspapers in Nigeria or in Vietnam printing it. That's the problem. That's even though compared to social media, it's very, very small though, but it's still it's reprinted and republished in a great deal of the world. That's the problem. So there is a resonance mechanism still. But it's dangerous because these people are part of Ray McGovern defined as the MISIMAT, the industrial, military, congressional, intelligence, media, academia, think tank complex, and a bubble. So this may not be necessarily what Trump 2.0 is thinking, but in this case, maybe, because Venezuela is a target. And especially now that Venezuela is getting closer to BRICS, it's also a target. Everybody who is in BRICS, is a BRICS partner, or is getting closer to BRICS, is a target of Trump 2.0, period.
they really do want to, Pepe. It seems that the main focus in the Trump administration would be North America and South America.
Mm-hmm.
And here is the article that we talked about.
Here. In fact, this idiot is writing for the New York Times now. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And do you see that coming to Brazil, and how are they going to do that?
Brazil is in the line of fire for obvious reasons. Number one power in Latin America and number one Latin American BRICS. So obviously Brazil is part of the swing states. When they came up with the swing states idea, code for let's throw hybrid war against these people, Brazil was the three BRICS at the time. Indonesia was not BRICS member at the time, a year and a half ago. Brazil, India, South Africa. I was in South Africa, November? Yeah, 2 months ago, I was in South Africa. Everybody that I talked in Johannesburg, they are pretty much aware that South Africa is a target, and there are very powerful fifth columnists inside South Africa and even at government level in South Africa. So they know. And in Brazil, it's very, very easy. A great deal of the old oligarchy, the new oligarchs, the new money, the people around Bolsonaro, these are fifth columnists. This is our, as Brazilians call it, entreguistas, yeah? Completely. And the anti-BRICS lobby, which is extremely serious, includes all these people, includes the Brazilian financial markets, and it's even inside the Brazilian foreign ministry. So Brazil will be a major target. There's no question about that. And I'm really sorry to see this from afar. And you in Brazil, you're going to experience it right in front of you. And it's Western Hemisphere, Nima, absolutely. The priority for Trump 2.0 is total control of the Western Hemisphere. What does that mean? Monroe Doctrine 2.0, which is now being defined as the Donroe Doctrine. Absolutely. It's exactly the same thing, because it's the only region of the planet where the empire is confident enough to rule everyone. And it doesn't require a lot of effort, considering the support of the comprador classes and the local oligarchies and the fifth colonists is widespread everywhere in Latin America. Look at Argentina now, for instance, delivered on a plate to the empire. In West Asia is much more volatile. In Eurasia, the empire is being expelled from Eurasia. And in Africa, it's China and Russia. Russia, soft power, now more investments, and China, investments everywhere. So there's no place for the empire in Africa. So what's left? The Western Hemisphere, Latin America. So everyone in Latin America will be a target.
I do believe that a Republican government in the United States would be better for Brazil, because we don't have that sort of leverage coming from the Democrats. We know how can they force, as they did in the case of Venezuela, being part of BRICS, and Brazil was just rejecting Venezuela's case, and that came from the Biden administration.
Of
I
course,
don't believe that
direct orders, Nima, direct orders, of course. Well, it's going to be a different sort of harassment. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
And we should pay a lot of attention to how Trump 2.0 is going to develop their relationship with the gigantic Bolsonaro camp. That's something to watch and track closely.
Yeah, they may come to power. Yeah, it's.
Can I ask you, Nima? Do you see them coming back to power in Brazil?
Yeah, definitely.
Why? Why? Give me one major reason.
Because these people who are supporting Bolsonaro, they're so fixed. They're so MAGA. They're so. You have to talk with them. You understand they're so angry with the system. They are not satisfied the way that system works right now. They feel, even though we had Bolsonaro for 4 years here in Brazil, he didn't do anything. So he literally didn't do anything. He cut the budget for the universities, federal universities, that it's all about research. It's all about working at the universities. No, China is just boosting, it's just increasing this sort of aids from the government. But Bolsonaro came to power and let's cut all the budget to the universities, let's make them private. But after all, in terms of the society, in terms of what he was promising to the Brazilian people. He didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And these people in Brazil have some sort of delusion that he wants to be a Donald Trump sort of character in Brazil, which he is not. And
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't have that sort of power that Donald Trump has in the United States. We know the system in Brazil. I can say the system in Brazil is much more functional than the one in the United States, at least to limit the president in what he wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe these people would vote for him and even come out largely to support him. And he will come to power. I really believe that Donald Trump would come to power. I talk with everybody around me here in Brazil. No, Donald Trump is done. He's not gonna come
Bolsonaro.
back. Yeah, no, I'm talking about Donald Trump before this happened in the United States.
Before. Okay.
Before
Right.
they were just ignoring the reality of the United States. It's the same way in Brazil, and they get a lot of influence from the United States. The United States is so much influential on Brazilian society, and these people who are supporting Bolsonaro, we have to understand it.
Mm.
But Bolsonaro is nothing. I don't see any sort of even with Lula. If you can have Lula and he cannot decide about Venezuela, a country which has been suffering a lot because of sanctions, and this is crucial. Lula was hammered here in Brazil because of his policies toward Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
And after all, he's going that way and supporting the Biden's policy toward Venezuela. It's so disappointing here in Brazil.
It is, but this was ordered directly, Nima. Remember when Jake Sullivan showed up in Brazil with the list of what Lula had to do? He had to follow, otherwise the Americans would throw him in jail again. And the Brazilian Foreign Ministry, they followed Sullivan's policies to the letter. There you go.
And the problem with Bolsonaro, I can see Miller in Bolsonaro. That's the problem. If they can turn the Miller on in Bolsonaro, that would be a huge problem for Brazil going forward. I'm talking about the president of Argentina.
Of course. Wow. It's much worse than we thought.
Let's see what would happen. Muito obrigado, Pepe.
Oh, querido. My last tribute of our conversation, David Lynch. And all of you, if you have a chance, rewatch Lynch's masterpieces. Everything from Elephant Man to Blue Velvet to Mulholland Drive, and especially Twin Peaks and the second season of Twin Peaks. In my Telegram channel, I put a link to when Twin Peaks The Return came, was during Trump 1.0. Trump was a presidency, and David Lynch finally. It's one of the most extraordinary cinematic experiences of the modern era. Twin Peaks, The Return. And at the time, guess what? Was the Americans pulling out of the INF Treaty. So, the possibility of a nuclear war went up substantially. And the most extraordinary chapter of Twin Peaks, The Return, is a chapter that explains the American rationale for getting a nuclear bomb. So if you have a chance, rewatch that. It's absolutely extraordinary. And David was one of the most extraordinary artists of the 20th and 21st century. So, at least we have his oeuvre to keep diving in, and especially Twin Peaks. I'm particularly fond of Twin Peaks because as a mix of, as a psychedelic dream inbuilt in philosophy, East and West. Nobody could do something like that. And I leave you all with one of Twin Peaks' major findings. The owls don't look the same. And this applies to our lives,
Yeah.
The owls never look the same. You have to look at the owl and then start to imagine what the owl is looking like.
Yeah.
It's a lesson to all of us,
Obrigado, Pepe.
Obrigado, querido.
Grande prazer, como sempre.
Enorme. E a próxima vai ser fora do Otanistão.
É,
Eu tô saindo do Otanistão semana que vem, não vejo a hora. Então, provavelmente a gente vai conversar de Moscou.
vamos sim.
Tá bom?
Obrigado.
Obrigado, querido.
Abraço.
Obrigado a vocês todos. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.